Do you believe the government is hiding the cure to cancer? Your answer is probably going to depend on what country you're coming from. The people of Denmark and Sweden really do not believe that. Only 8% of people there believe the government is hiding this cure. Finland's also pretty low at 10%, and the Netherlands only at 16%. Now, the numbers get closer to a third when you get to... Oh, crap. You just like landed on my shoulder. Yes, that's a sign to go ahead and plug the plushies. Yeah, you could get Ireland and Scotland, and maybe they will pop up on your shoulder. Just head over to makeshift.com using that first link in the description down below. The hell? That was really weird. Never seen that happen before. This feels like the government's sign to stop talking about this topic immediately. Now, we start to get closer and closer to a third of the population here in France, Germany, Belgium. It is basically a third of British people that believe the government is hiding this cure. And you know what? In Ireland, it's pretty high, 42%. Why does Iceland have a 9% here, but they're not labeled? This is a really sussy map. I'm starting to ask a whole lot of questions. Portugal and Spain over a third, but interestingly enough, this question is really divided by geography. You have much higher rates of yes coming out of the Anatolia Peninsula, the Balkans, even the Italian Peninsula, 40%. And funny enough, we can actually go one step deeper and just look at, well, mostly Italy is always divided down the middle. The northern provinces are going to think a lot more like Western states, whereas the southern are going to think a lot more like the Balkans. That's always the case no matter what topic we're specifically talking about in this peninsula. So them being at 40% actually does check out. There just seems to be a much higher likelihood to have a conspiratorial mindset, well, the further away you are from, I guess, continental Europe. I mean, that's not necessarily the case with Poland, but how in the heck? The weird one is Luxembourg. Luxembourg, a very rich nation surrounded by other nations that are like pretty solidly in the 20s. How did Luxembourg get as high as 40%? More than the British, more than Iberia. They're tied with Portugal. Oh yeah, Portugal's Balkan, so it's different. These are such high numbers coming from Italy though. 71%, almost 3/4 of people do believe there's a cure and it's being hidden. My goodness. Such an interesting map, actually. Like, going deeper than just this question alone, it says a lot about just the way people think in different parts of the world. There's clearly a lot more skepticism here. I would love to ask these people what they think about, like, COVID, for instance. Just their own government or every government in the world, because that would be one hell of a conspiracy. Yeah, I kind of tend to think that the bigger the conspiracy would have to be, like, the more people that would have to be involved in keeping the secret, the less likely it is to be true. However, if it's only a handful of people that are guarding the information, I don't know. We gotta watch this movie Eyes Wide Shut. This is so sad. There must be a huge correlation to the data on perceived government corruption. Do keep in mind, though, the actual question was the cure for cancer exists, but it's hidden from the public by commercial interest. Okay, that's worded a bit more specifically there. This poll actually has nothing to do with the government at all. Again, going deeper than just this question alone, I think this really reveals a lot about the mindset of certain places. I bet you there's like some correlation to history there too. It does appear that if you've had maybe a more rough history, you might be more skeptical of a lot of things. That's not even just in Europe, that's an American thing too. So do you lock your doors at night? There are certain states that don't, apparently. Who is not locking their door at night? Actually, you know what? To be honest, there are nights where I forget to lock my door. I shouldn't be saying that out loud on YouTube, but that is the popular thing to do in California. 85% of Californians lock their door, which makes sense. It is a little dangerous out here sometimes. It's actually insane to me that we aren't getting closer to 90% in some of these places, though. The only two places hitting 90 is Connecticut, and the number one on the list, it's Georgia at 93%. I feel like those numbers should be everywhere, but then again, I did just admit that I forget to lock my door sometimes. Maybe like, oh man, I shouldn't say this. It sounds so crazy. Maybe like once a month I forget to lock my front door. Bro. I need to stop talking right now. Something that immediately jumps out to me is that you're having lower percentages in some of the more rural states. Like the people in Oklahoma, like they might not even have to lock their door because there's no one even around. Like my family lives in the middle of nowhere in Texas. They have no neighbors. Like I can see why they don't even need to lock their door. They probably should, but it's funny because I would love to be able to compare this data to, well, data from 50 years ago. I'm not sure we even have that. But believe it or not, like this is more of a recent phenomenon, or at least as of the last couple decades. In the 70s, specifically like the 60s and 50s, people weren't locking their doors at all. Sounds insane. I mean, Idaho probably is more similar to those numbers. Only 55% of people are locking their doors here. This area specifically is the less populated part of the US. It's interesting to see Wyoming lock their doors so much. But yeah, North Dakota being so low, I mean, dang, there's no one that really lives there. Wyoming actually is a lot higher than I expected. There might be some religious things going on in Utah at only 65%. More trust in the community. AI is telling me the vast majority of Americans did not consistently lock their doors either in the 1950s, which goes goes along with what I've learned as well. Yeah, the 70s, we saw a huge shift in crime, though, and serial murders, basically. Grew up in Idaho, front door was locked. Right next to the front door was a door to the garage. It was always unlocked, and so was the door into the house, always. The BSA, or Burglars Society of America, thanks you for this map. Very good point, though, in the replies. You can enter some of these houses that don't have their front door locked, but you might not be able to leave with your life. Honestly, I gotta be real, a lot of these people are hoping that you walk into their unlocked front door. They've been waiting for this moment for a while. Pew pew. Pretty sure Alaska is so high because of the bears. That does make sense. This is exactly what I was trying to say, though. This is probably more representative of urbanization, meaning the more urban the population of a state, the more likely people are to lock their doors. Yeah, if you live in like a city center, everyone's gonna lock their doors in the city. It's funny I'm reviewing this because I'm pretty sure I feel like I didn't lock my door last night. Who wants to join the EU the most? So here's the current map of all the European Union members. There's a total of 27, but that could very likely grow in the future. It's not always that easy, though, for this massive organization to let new places in. At the end of this data, I'm going to talk about which country I think is the most likely to actually join in the future. But right now, Albania wants to join the most at 94%. You'll notice a theme here in the pockets of non-EU territory. Well, these places are, of course, going to want to join the EU. To start off the list, we've got Albania. Now, Albania actually does already border an EU member, so it does make sense. Then we have another bordering country, that's Kosovo at 90%. Now, to be fair, Kosovo is going to be a little bit harder to get in there. First of all, they don't border an EU member. Not that that really matters, but they're also not recognized by Serbia. Even more awkwardly, though, we've got Ukraine at 87%. Remember that just because a country really wants to join the EU doesn't mean they can let that happen. Maybe one day for Ukraine, but the whole war probably has got to end first. And I'm sure the EU would love Ukraine to get in there, but then we got Georgia at 83%. This seems to be the name that I see tossed around a lot lately. Not the state, the country. Don't worry, USA. But this is all the way across the Black Sea. But I've seen a lot of EU expansion, talks about going into the Caucasus Mountains. There's Montenegro at 83%, Bosnia at 83%, North Macedonia at 79%, Moldova's only at 61%. The numbers are getting lower, but that's still a majority. Then there's Turkey, who's been waiting since the 80s to join the EU. Pretty sure they submitted first to join back in like 83 or something. Sorry, that was 1987. In 1999, Turkey was granted candidate status, but yeah, it's been frozen for quite some time now. Again, I already mentioned it, but there's so many things that go into accepting new EU members, like especially for a country like Turkey, which would be the new most populated EU member. It would be insanity. That would be a very difficult thing to do. Finally, there's the chance the UK rejoins. They're at 48%. Then Iceland, Serbia, Norway, who has like a special status, and then of course Switzerland. Dang, Switzerland does not really want to join. They're only 7%. Switzerland might be one of the only countries on this list that it would actively hurt. Probably Switzerland and Norway. Those are pretty rich countries as it is. Yeah, so in my opinion, I think the most likely out of all these to join, probably the most recent, is probably the UK. I mean, they were already in it. I think if they were to somehow hold another vote in the next like 5 years, then yeah, we might see them secretly. Well, that's already been happening a little bit with like all the talks with Trump and the tariffs. It has pulled the UK and EU slightly closer together now, more than before. To be fair, Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland are already in the EFTA. They pretty much already work with the EU. I would say there's a majority of Turkish population that is now against joining the EU. There's growing EU skepticism, even more secular groups within the Turkish society. UK 52 to 48%. Those magic numbers again. Yeah, where was Canada on the list? Canada can join. I think they're gonna have to give up Alberta though first. What's the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to these US cities? The most common Google searches for Los Angeles is why are they so popular? Honestly, I don't even know. Price being expensive. I want to know the same thing. Why is San Diego so expensive? It doesn't feel like it should be that expensive, honestly. Like you gotta spend LA prices for significantly less to do? It doesn't make any sense. Been asking myself this for a while. Like, bro, San Diego, what the hell? Another Californian city, why is San Jose so boring? I wouldn't know, I've never been. San Francisco, very expensive. Portland, Oregon gets weird. I probably have Googled that myself. Why is Seattle loud? I didn't notice that personally. Why is Boise smoky? Why is Las Vegas cheap? Gambling subsidies. There you go. Why is Tahoe blue? What are you even talking about? Why is Salt Lake City salty? Why is Phoenix big? Why is Tucson hot? Well, you're in the middle of a freaking desert. Albuquerque's windy. El Paso is safe. Really? Why is Austin liberal? Why is San Antonio hot? Why is boring why is Dallas Fort Worth boring? Bro, yes. I hate Dallas. I've had to fly in there way too much. It's so boring. Why is Houston big? Why is New Orleans dirty? Damn. Why is Oklahoma City Republican? Why is St. Louis racist? Why is Kansas City good? Why is Omaha humid? Sioux Falls cold. Minneapolis cold. I thought we were gonna get a little bit more cold here. Fargo just gets good. Milwaukee is segregated. Chicago's windy. Indianapolis is ghetto. Bro, is that the only city that got ghetto? Yeah, Detroit just got dangerous. Nashville's great, but Memphis gets bad. Why is Birmingham important? Why is Atlanta gay? Yo, these searches are insane. Jacksonville's bad. Miami is warm. That's the best for Miami? I got a lot more of the questions about what Miami. Why is Miami just like that? Richmond is expensive. Washington, D.C. is liberal. Baltimore is bad. Philadelphia is ghetto. Okay, so they get ghetto too. Cleveland's bad. Pittsburgh is cold. Buffalo is cold. New York City and Boston just get great. Man, some of these cities really got thrown under the bus here, huh? Me pretending like I totally wouldn't Google some of these questions for these cities, honestly. Top question. What's happening in Atlanta? It's like the gayest place in the Deep South, maybe? Yeah, I do like the states that didn't even make it on the map. I think this is slightly misleading because if someone is Googling why is X so blank, it doesn't necessarily mean they believe that. Yeah, this is just the reputation a lot of these cities have already. Seattle's loud. Oh, referring to the Seattle Seahawks Stadium. It's called the 12th Man. Kansas City, good. St. Louis, racist. Funny enough, if you're a part of any of these cities' tourists departments, you're probably hyper aware of what's going on with these Google searches and actively trying your best to fight it more than likely. To the untrained eye, I feel like this map might not look that interesting, but I think it's fascinating. This is Germany's largest immigrant communities. We have mostly Turkish in this part of Germany and then mostly Ukrainian in this part. Now, this might be one of the only maps of Germany that I've seen recently that isn't perfectly divided into their old Cold War days. Germany has been together now for 35 years, yet they still function as almost two completely different countries. When it comes to so many different data maps, elections included, Germany still reflects these old borders. However, not with this largest migration group, but I do find something else interesting here. It is really fascinating to see the Ukrainians really focus on this part of Germany, whereas the Turks are more in the south, specifically in Bavaria. You would maybe think it would come down to geography, but I don't think so. Both these countries are coming out from the east. Obviously, Turkey is more south. Maybe the Turks just prefer the climate over here, and the Ukrainians obviously want more of the cold. There are still pockets of Turkish coming in more of the urban areas, specifically Berlin. Lots of Turks going into Berlin, actually beating out the Ukrainians. Ukrainians actually might be going to the more rural areas. And then we have Syria down this way. The Syrians used to really be the big group here in Germany, but obviously things have changed for the last decade. First comment, wow, you have finally found a data set that does not match the former East/West German border. No, 10 years ago it was all red and white. What is happening to our Turks in Germany? You mean what is happening in Ukraine? And the answer is Putin. Would be interesting to see what this map looked like pre-invasion of Ukraine. Some of these comments are pointing out that these Turks have been here for generations, and that also made me think about, well, the old World War I allies that these two were before. Germany and Turkey coming together to fight the world. I don't know if they're necessarily trying to fight the world, but they were during the World War I times. Turkey was just called the Ottoman Empire. So this friendship has ran deep. Big old thanks to my patrons over at Patreon. Go out here calling bro a history expert. Tambre, Drew's Argentinian Trust Fund, NordTyrol, Nolan, Miglu the Goat, LuxembourgLover, KirinoIsBestGirl, KingBearHaze, Fredrik Tibblin, DOOCHBAGGINS, Pavlik, Carmel Saida, AlexanderTheTerrible. If you'd like your name here, check out that link in the description down below to patreon.com.